Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com, this is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
I'm going to ask a question I have never asked before, believe it or not. And about 50 years of broadcasting, make that 60. It is this. Is technology replacing good parenting? Debbie and I were out for dinner last night, probably the last patio meal of the season. The meal was great, but I was fascinated by the table next to us. Well, actually not the table, but the 5 people seated at it. Mother and father and 3 little girls. Girls looked to be about 5, 7, 8, somewhere in that range of age. I couldn't help but notice how quiet and how still they were, how well behaved, at least that's what I thought and said. Throughout the entire dinner, it was like you never heard a peep from them. Children of that age are usually pretty restless after a few minutes, bouncing around, etc., requiring a good deal of parental supervision. But these little girls hardly moved a muscle for the better part of an hour. Why? Well, they were fully engrossed in their iPads, looking at heaven only knows what. I remarked to Debbie how quiet they were, at which point she said something that really got me thinking. Sad, she said. Those iPads are replacing parenting. Oh, really hit me. I had never thought of it in those terms. Even when the meals arrived, the girls had difficulty pulling themselves away from the screens. The parents made no attempt to remove the iPads or insist that the girls eat their food. They kind of picked at it while still fully engrossed in the screens. And it got me thinking. On Friday, we got into a pretty good discussion, maybe it was Monday, on parenting, who was responsible for the attack by 6 teenagers at Gloucester High. Was it the school or the parents? So we got into a pretty good discussion of parenting, and a lot of people decried the fact that parenting in some cases isn't what it used to be. And it got me thinking in this regard, as it could it be that at least part of the problem is that technology has begun to replace parenting. It's replacing friends too, but let's talk about parenting today. Parents no longer need to do much parenting, at least in many situations. The iPads, the iPhones have taken over. It used to be that a good deal of parenting would be required if there were little children eating out. What are some of the phrases that parents, my parents used, or grandparents? Keep your elbows off the table.
Oh, yeah.
Close your mouth while you're eating. Keep your voice down. Stop kicking the table. Sit up straight. Just a few phrases we used to hear from parents when eating out with children. If you don't behave, I'm going to take you outside, used to be a fairly common phrase. I'm sure some of that parenting still exists. I'm positive it does, but it sure wasn't in evidence last night. The iPads did the parenting, keeping the children occupied, quiet, and still. Maybe great for the parents. But I really wonder if it's good for the children. If any of you have any thoughts in this regard, any observations, there's no question that, and there is scientific research which indicates that in some cases, these screens can be addictive, that you become addicted. As some people are addicted to alcohol or smoking. You become addicted to these screens. But it's from the context of parenting that I'm primarily interested. I know that some parents are concerned about the content that's on the iPad or the iPhones, and that's very legitimate. But could it be that the real culprit here is not so much what's on the screen, but the screens themselves, which allow parents to just kind of mail in their duty, that they can take parenting off, that they can let the iPads look after the kids and they can do something else. I don't know about you, but I just don't think that learning to be a good kid from an iPad is nearly as beneficial as learning to be a good kid and eventually a good adult from your parents. Any thoughts on any of this, folks? I would really appreciate hearing from you. It's a it's a new thought for me, and I'm just wondering if this whole age of technology is one of the problems that parents are allowing iPads to take over too much. Now I know that in many cases the iPad time is restricted, etc. But I'm going to tell you, I suspect that in many cases it's not. So not only does it affect parenting, absolve parents of a lot of the duties and responsibilities, but I think in other ways as well, it's replacing friends. And I mean, there were great benefits when you were growing up and you had friends. The lessons that you learned from your friends, fair play, how to do this, how to do that, how to get along with other, how to socialize, how to compete. You learn all of those things from play with friends. But if you're only corresponding with your friends through the iPads, I just don't think a lot of that exists anymore. Some of the problems, and I'm just wondering if anybody out there has done anything to address these problems. If you've heard of any other parents that are concerned about this, what are your thoughts on this? Is technology beginning to replace good parenting? Is that one of the problems we've got with bad kids today? That their parents didn't parent them, that the iPhones parented them. What do you think, John? Any response to this point?
Yeah, getting some good response. Of course, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitch as well. We invite your phone calls. If you want to use that technology, we actually invite you to use it for the show to comment. You can text or you can call 613-413-2217. Mims is on YouTube, says, I think it's a combination of government, parental rules, what a parent can or cannot do, and today's technology. I feel sorry for our younger generation.
Yeah, let's address the issue though. Is technology taking over the role of parenting? I'm going to tell you, you may disagree, but it sure as hell did last night. Those three little girls, I swear to God, for at least an hour, never moved a muscle. Parents didn't have to do any parenting whatsoever. Now, it was great for the parents. They were free to converse, and I suppose that's a good thing and so forth. The people around them, with three girls of that age sitting there for an hour, and in some circumstances, it could be a bother for people and other tables around them. Kids of that age can be kind of disruptive, let's be honest. Didn't happen last night. So it was great for the people around them. It was great for the parents. But is it great for the kids? Are they missing something? What do you think on that? Please, John, what else have we
see
got
right there, I think you're exactly right. It has afforded the parents the opportunity to tune out. Okay, the kids are quiet. We can have our time now. And you know what? I've laughed at it for a long, long time, talking about, I can look at my two little nieces when they're traveling to and from, they got a place in Nova Scotia. They travel to and from in Ottawa. And they're in the back seat of this car, and they've each got their own screen hanging on the back of, mom and dad's seat. And they've got their own movies, their own shows that they're watching. I mean, when we traveled, we actually had to have conversations in the car, coloring books, and, and then games, yeah. Absolutely. I Spy, Punch Buggy, on and on and on. Yeah. Yeah.
And also the phrase, if you don't stop that, I'm going to stop this car and you're going to have to get out.
I'm going to turn the car around and go home was my favorite. And I never heard it again when I finally turned around and I said, okay, let's do that.
So they have each one has their own individual screen.
Yes.
So you're right. There's no interaction with the world around them, not even the scenery. I mean, we used to when we traveled when we were kids. There were certain games. In my day, you try to identify the make of the automobiles that passed. Okay. Well, there's a Model T, there's a Model A, and then the punch buggy. That was the Volkswagen. Remember that? Called the punch.
Absolutely.
What was the rule there? If you saw
Punch
Volkswagen,
buggy blue, no punchbacks.
okay, what
So
you could
you,
hit your brother or what it was?
well, yeah, you can smack him on the shoulder.
Yeah,
Never in the face, especially if you wore glasses. We talked about that again on Tuesday.
yeah.
But yeah, you just give him a little punch on the shoulder, and you would call out punch buggy, and then the color of the punch buggy. And if you didn't say no punchbacks, he could punch you back. So you had to say no punchbacks.
So there was a little bit of a game, but there was also observation. You were observing some of the world around you. But
Absolutely.
now with the screen, you're not. Uh, any other response out there, John?
Yeah, Woodenhead says fewer parents at home because they need a dual income to sustain themselves. So by virtue
Yeah,
of that, I
let's
guess they're
okay.
popping in front of technology.
But let's see if we can get some comment on my question here, please. Okay. If not, we'll just move on to something else.
All right.
Um,
We're getting a
uh,
lot of engagement, though.
okay. All right. Yeah, but let's deal with the topic, please. It's technology. Is technology beginning to replace parenting in some areas? Go ahead, please.
All right, over to Lisa on Facebook. Yes, Lowell, it is. My spouse barely interacts with his son because the kid is constantly glued to his Xbox. He plays online with his friends into the wee hours, and it's affected his school marks, and they're all in the shitter, she says. I'm getting a little taste of that with my niece having moved in with us. It is technology constantly. You know, the whole world revolves around it. And says these devices have become
Airsats,
AirSats.
babysitter,
I'm not familiar with that word. Thank you. I
fake, sort of fake, or replacing. Okay.
Got it. Got it. Yep, makes sense when I read the rest of the words. Thank you. I recall putting my daughters in front of a video on TV if I was busy working in the kitchen, etc., but that was not for the whole day. These devices are in use pretty much the whole day. It's not a good trend. Kids used to call each other on the phone. Now they just text. Why? Because it's shorter and faster, but antisocial.
I will never forget. This is a number of years ago. Debbie and I are in Toronto, and we're going to I think it was a Blue Jays game. So we're going up an escalator. Don't ask me where. And there were two teenaged girls. One teenage girl was sort of behind us on the escalator. The other was just above us. They were talking to each other on the phone. Honest to God, I could hear the girl down below me talking, and she's
Yeah.
talking to her friend on the phone. Or just I mean, she was within shouting distance, but they're talking to each other on the phone. Now I'm not sure how that relates to parenting, but it's an illustration of the manner in which technology is taking over. But I can remember in the early days of television, parents would allow their kids maybe 1 hour. You can watch this show. You can watch Bugs Bunny or whatever it was, but then that was it. That's your allotted time. I don't think that exists anymore with iPads and iPhones.
But that was the conversation when I grew up in the 70s and 80s. You would hear about these awful parents who would just plunk their kids in front of the TV, and the TV was bringing their kids up. Well, now, I mean, that's nothing.
Now it's the iPhone.
Oh, God forbid that iPhone lose power. What do you do with your kids once
But it took Debbie last night to point this out. I was I'm going to be honest with you. I was happy that the kids were quiet because it drives me crazy when we don't get out very much anymore. And it drives me crazy if my meal is interrupted by some kid kicking the table or misbehaving or whatever they're doing.
And that's why those parents are perfectly happy to let their kids do that.
Precisely.
Because now they're not getting that evil eye from Lowell Green when he's out for dinner.
But they're also not learning. Like Debbie pointed out, one of the little girls had her feet up on the chair, which in the old would not be allowed.
Oh,
Another one had both elbows on the table. So it's whether it's totally technology, I don't know. But there's no question that technology in some cases, certainly last night, took over parenting. No question.
Well, because it's ease of access too, right? I mean, you're right. I mean, like even when I started dating my wife, I mean, we're going back about 30 years, but she still laughs at the fact that, some of the rules in my house were there's no jeans allowed at the dining room table. I mean, that was a place of respect where the family
and no
gathered.
hat. You were not allowed.
Oh,
It drives me crazy. I know we're getting a little off topic here, but when you go out, even sometimes to a good restaurant,
yep.
and some guy's got wearing his hat.
Yep.
I'll never forget.
Lowell, they don't even take the hats off anymore for the national anthem.
I know. I don't know. I have to tell you a little story.
Sure.
This is a number of years ago, and we had a good friend, and they were here, who came for dinner, and she brought her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was one nice guy, but he had this baseball cap. And so uh, Jeremy, who is our son, knows that we don't allow caps at the dinner table. Okay. So, anyway, in order to be very polite, he said, "Okay, folks, let's all take our caps off and sit down." So, there was only the one guy with the cap. So, he looked up and he took his cap off. Anyway, I just thought I'd pass that on. Go ahead. Times have changed.
Yep. All right. Chris says, my circumstances may be unique, but I have a 5-year-old autistic son. He frequently uses his iPad, but it's been a godsend for helping his learning and communication skills. I'm thankful we have that technology.
Well, that's good. That's a special situation. I'm pleased to see that. But nonetheless, would you not agree, if he wants to respond, that it's still very important, particularly with autistic children, that you have that interaction with people too? That's very important. Eye contact with autistic children, they tell me, is very important. Go ahead, please, John.
Here's a text at 613-413-2217. Lowell, I think the kids that beat up the boy probably were ignored growing up, maybe playing video games, etc. As for the kids with iPads, they are probably being brought up a little better than those hoods. I know for my kids, there's a time and a place for electronics. Schoolwork comes first, and even that needs computers. They do have friend time as well.
Good. Well, that's good.
Over to Twitch. Twitch, for some reason, is not showing up in my feed, but I go to it, and there it is. Technology is always number one at Shields, says Chris. Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. Thank you. We used to ground our children with no screens for a certain number of days when they got in trouble, says Renee. And Julie says, I think it's parents using the technology to keep their kids quiet, but they're not using restrictions. Kids use way too much technology these days.
By the way, talking about this reminds me of another little story. A dear friend. And his son at the time was about 8 or 9, and he was really acting up. So daddy sends him down to his room. The kid doesn't mind because he's got the television down there. Oh no, says dad. He goes down, and those were the days when we had big television. They were heavy. Dad goes down, and to the kid couldn't believe it. The boy could not believe it. Dad is down there, grabs the television, takes the television out of his room. So then now the little boy, I'll never forget it, the look on his face. Oh my God, they're taking my television. But he did. That was the punishment. Go ahead.
Same thing happened to us. My dad would disconnect the cable, and then we were, out of luck. Out of luck. Now you just got to fire up dad's phone and change the Wi-Fi password. You want back on? Shovel the driveway.
Well, I wonder, I'd be interested to know if there are any parents out there who have actually taken the iPads away from the kids.
Ooh.
When we grew up, they certainly removed the television, or in some cases the radio. I just wonder if anybody's doing that with iPads. Go ahead, please.
I would love to hear from the parents. And, I mean, that defeats the whole purpose of giving them the iPads in the first place. Now you have to actually deal with your child. Chris has a follow-up, by the way. He says, I agree on the contact with others being huge. No iPad at school. We communicate at supper time and the like, but the iPad has been so huge with the games and children's videos. His language skills have grown in leaps and bounds with his frequent education at his fingertips.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
My son slammed his door until I took it off. Wow.
That used to be fairly common punishment, usually for girls. Girls would slam the door. They wanted their privacy. And so sometimes as punishment, dad would take the door off. I don't think very many dads today would be able to take the door off. Probably don't have a screwdriver.
Well, if they grab the iPad, they can Google it and find out. And by the way, I'm married to a notorious door slammer, just so you know.
Oh, is that right?
We got a couple of comments still to go, Lowell. Let's get a word in 04 Shields, as Chrissy mentioned.
Yes, I just once again want to remind you that Shields is there, not only now the in-stock dealer for appliances, all the major brands. They continue to tell me that about 90% of anything that you could possibly want, at whatever brand, whatever make, whatever price range, whatever color that you want in appliances, 90% sure that they have it in stock, which means it can be in your house in the next few days. Also, they are now a registered Sony dealership, and more people are beginning to realize that not only can they get their kitchen appliances, etc., but radio, and you know what Sony produces, that now Shields is a Sony dealer. www.shields.ca. You'll see it all there, folks. Very easy to use website, by the way. Shields. Go ahead, John.
Back to text at 613-413-2217. This person says, just curious how many parents out there actually read stories to their toddlers. I have not found this within my circle. It's a shame. Is it laziness or is it ignorance? Asks Ruth.
Well, maybe like the little girl, the youngest little girl last night would be about 5, and she'd be one that would love, I'm sure, to have stories read to her. And it could very well be that her parents do that. Um, uh, but yeah, it's so important. Kids love to be read to. And one of the things, Debbie, for example, all our grandchildren got the Mother Goose rhymes. Kids love
Yeah,
those
yeah.
rhymes. They, hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such sport, and the dish ran away with the spoon. The kids just love that kind of
Little
thing.
Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds and whey.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And one of the most popular recent books apparently was Five Little Monkeys Bouncing on a Bed. Did you ever see that one?
Oh, that's familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, not in
And
my day, but I've certainly heard that being read in the house.
one jumped, one fell off and broke his head. So the kids loved it, but they also taught them a little bit about mathematics. But kids, but I wonder, like, if kids are missing out and not Aesop's fables. Does any kid ever read Aesop's fables anymore? I don't. To me, it was such an important part of growing up. Go ahead, John, please.
Kellyanne says she always read both to her kids. Here's a comment
Good.
from Woodenhead. He says, when my kids piss me off, I turn off the internet. And yes, I have removed the doors after they've been slammed as well.
Good. Well, there's still some good. You know what? Most kids, let's be very honest. Most young people out there today are admirable. They're great. Like all the friends, our grandchildren's friends are just great people. They're going to be great adults. They're becoming great adults themselves. But very clearly, not everybody is in that same category.
No,
John?
and there's definitely, pardon me, there's definitely a shift that we've seen with this use of technology and the ease of this technology, that instead of talking to your kid and explaining you don't talk at the table, here, just give them an iPad and therefore they won't talk. There's a big difference, and the psychological impact of that, I'm sure, are being studied as we speak, and the results would be interesting to see.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, like last night, those 3 little girls. You're right. There's no question that under normal circumstances, the parents would have had to straighten the kids out a few
Yeah.
times. They would have become restless, but there would have been conversations with the parent. The parents in all probability would say, what was school like today? What did you do? Do you like all of those things? And none of that occurred. There was absolutely no communication between 3 little girls and their parents at that table last night. And I'm sure that that's fairly common. John?
Lisa's daughter loved that book, The Five Little Monkeys, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sean says, a friend of mine doesn't take the electronics away. He just cuts the Wi-Fi when the kids are bad. I knew that would happen. I knew someone would have an example of that. We need to get back to reading Aesop's fables, says Coraline, especially The Little Boy Who Cried Wolf. One of my favorites.
Very, very true.
Maggie says, we have a bookcase full of books for when they visit. They love it. Some of the books are 40 plus years old. Books were read. They're the books we read to their parents. Anne says, that is sad if parents aren't reading to their young children anymore. That is terrific bonding time, especially right before they go to bed. My daughter used to love it, and I hope she has children someday, and she will do the same for them. Let's go back to text, 613-413-2217. Yes, I have one friend that turns off the Wi-Fi in the late evening when school marks are not good. One even configured their system to give each child 3 hours a day in internet and have grounded them from their iPhone for a week. Oh, boy. Then you have to deal with an actual belligerent child.
I'm still, the question is still out there, and we're partially responsible. We've sort of gotten off. But I still think it's a valid question. Is technology in some cases replacing parenting? Is that one of? I'm not suggesting it's the only problem, but is it one of the problems that we've got in society today that we should address? There's no question that last night those 3 little girls, there was no parenting involved. It was all iPad. Go ahead, John.
Here's a direct answer to your question. As I scan through what we've got from earlier, Darlene says, parents are the problem. I find the majority of adults communicating by text messages rather than phoning. Kids are losing out in the long run, can't solve problems, not understanding when people do actually physically speak to them. Yeah, that's interesting that the parents are, also on their phones, so the kids are doing exactly as they see their parents doing.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, you're right. You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that. The three little girls were constantly on the phone, but so were their parents. No, actually, the father had a small laptop computer. He was working at the
Well,
dinner. Honest to God, now that you remind me, he was working on the computer
oh.
at the dinner table. His wife, the mother, was looking at her iPad, and the three little girls on the iPad. I just wonder how healthy that is. Go ahead, John.
See, and I happen to know where you went for that meal. I mean, that's a lovely place to
Yeah,
sit there on computers and technology. I
yeah.
mean, it's just, what a shame. What a shame. You know what? There's a great business guru. His name's Simon Sinek, and I read a lot of his stuff. And one of the things he talks about is when he goes out with friends, there is an agreement collectively, whether they're going, let's say that's 12 adults going out, they bring one cell phone for the entire group. All the babysitters have that one number should they need to text or call for an emergency. And that way, when they go to dinner, they have the one phone taking pictures. They have the one phone in case of emergencies. They can actually go and talk. I would love someone to set up a restaurant where that is the policy. One phone per table.
Conversation only at this table.
Yeah,
Maybe we can get Trudeau to mandate that.
oh, but then how would he take his selfies? I digress. Yes, Lowell is right, Suzanne. These devices have made society very antisocial and have supplanted parenting a lot of the time. And what is on these devices? Bad examples of violence and bad behavior.
Yeah, that's another issue. I mentioned that some parents, rightly so, are concerned about the content. But I'm still wondering if the real danger is not the content so much, but the screen itself. The lack of parenting that's required anymore. And yeah, you know what? This is how times change. It used to be that we use the television. Okay, you got to sit the kid in front of a television Saturday morning and watch cartoons. Okay, now you're sitting the kid in front of a screen, essentially 24 hours a day. Go ahead.
Joshua says, wonder if there's a family out there listening in going, he's talking about us. It's interesting you talked about, putting the kids in front of the TV. We were allowed a certain number of hours in front of the TV where we could choose the show, and there were four of us in the house. So, if you didn't like what your sister or your brother chose, you watched it anyway because, TV time was limited. But there was time in front of the TV for the family. And David says the same thing. So, David, apparently your house and my house are doing the same thing. TV time, he says, was family time. Sunday was Wonderful World of Disney, followed by the Beachcombers. Always, always, always looked forward to that.
So this was family time. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
It's hard. You know what? When the kids are little, that's probably quite possible. But when they become teenagers, pretty hard sometimes. If I don't mind if the teenagers are out playing with their friends. One of the problems, and I mentioned this, is that I think in many cases iPhones have replaced friends. Now they may text them back and forth, but the interaction, four or five guys going out with their bicycles and tearing around and doing. I don't think kids are doing that very much anymore.
Yeah, put some baseball cards back in those spokes and get out there and make some noise up and down Lowell Green Street. He loves those noises.
But the lessons you learn from your friends, I mean, you learn. I mean, there are adults today who have all sorts of difficulty, integrating into society because they probably never learned as a child. But you learn to integrate into society, to get along with other people, including perhaps some pretty nasty people. You learn to get along somehow or other, but you learn that while you're playing with your friends. Go ahead.
And that's that's one of the things too that I loved about the Sunday night family time around the TV is once the shows were done, the TV went off and there was a discussion about what we watched and a discussion about the movie. I don't think parents are having a discussion as to what their kids just watched on their iPad or their iPhone, and maybe there's the difference. Is it's we can all pick and choose whatever we're watching, so there's no opportunity to really engage. Richard, this is your first comment of the day. Let's go to you. Growing up, we had Saturdays. Every Saturday. It would belong one every Saturday. Sorry, I belong to. One every Saturday. It would belong to one of my brothers who gets to watch whatever they wanted for the week until the next Saturday when it was my other brother's turn, and so on and so on. Oh, how simple things were back in the day.
But let's get back. We're running short of time.
Yeah, we are.
Whether technology is intruding on parenting here. Are parents, at least some of the parents, allowing technology to take over some of their parenting roles? That to me is key here today. But it's been an interesting conversation nonetheless on parenting. Go ahead, John.
Listeners, if you want to, we've got about 30 seconds left. If you want to type quickly, yes or no. Is technology replacing good parenting? Yes or no. We'll try and get that in. Meanwhile, yes, my son was an avid reader up until 2 years ago, says Kellyanne. The pandemic didn't really help either because kids were so isolated. We had one TV station in Kakabeka Falls, so we couldn't wait to go out and play, says Deborah. All right. Is technology replacing good parenting? Yes, says Terry. Yes, says Lynn. Come on, folks. There you go. Corleen says yes. Mike says yes.
Okay.
Absolutely yes, says Ann. So there you go, Lowell. The answer to your question is absolutely a resounding yes.
Thank you very much, folks. Back tomorrow.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.